Hi, this is Tim of the 1916 Company putting on my Bethune hat. If you love the watch you see here, reach out to me, Team Mosso at thewatchbox.com for purchase and pricing inquiries. We are launching the 2024 Bethune DB28 XS Purple Rain, a 25-piece limited edition in the case size introduced in 2023. The model features extraordinary purple fired grade 5 titanium. So, in the tradition of the smaller XS case, it is 38.7 millimeters in diameter by 8.9 millimeters thick. It measures lug-to-lug 48.7 millimeters with the lugs extended and compressed. The spring-loaded floating lugs are now 44.9 millimeters with a spacing of 23 millimeters between the lugs. All in titanium and sapphire, the Purple Rain is utterly weightless. It is almost unnervingly light. And because it is narrow and becomes more so with the floating lugs compressed, this is a watch that'll work on a wrist as small as 13.5 centimeters circumference. And so this is actually an option for ladies for the first time. There's a DB28 that will fit you and also, frankly, me, as the previous watches were a little bit broad. It's got a good planted look on the wrist, and the feel is just as tight, secure, and confidence-inspiring. Now, it's a thin watch. 8.9 millimeters means it slides easily underneath the cuff, but it is an expressive thing, so you probably don't want to disappear this 25-piece limited edition underneath your sleeve. Taking a look at the strap, this is one area where I can advise you that the production strap will be better. This is a placeholder strap. Production will include purple stitching for a nice subtle contrast. You could see the firing used to create the purple tone. Somewhere between the firing length used to create the former yellow tones and the firing length, the longest firing length, used to create the more conventional Bethune blue. This is fired at a temperature and for a duration somewhere between the yellow tones and the kind of blue. And you can see that it creates wonderful oxidation patterns across the metal, some of which are more of a spectrum than a solid color. And you can see that across all of the surfaces. Now, the case is very familiar to DB28 XS fans because being a monoblock, there's no separate bezel and case, so it's a very seamless look all the way around, but it's also flatter and more compact than previous DB28 models. Now, because there is now more clearance between the lug and the crown is no longer a screw down, so it's easier to gain access to it. Everything loads through the back of the watch, so that's why there is no seam between bezel and case. The contours of the case actually change as you move around. You can see the bezel elongates and extends down at 6 o'clock, and then shoulders emerge as it elongates and flanks the double knurled crown up at the top. Of course, we have open, airy, spring-loaded floating lugs. This was patented first in 2008 on the DB26 perpetual calendar, and it really does make the watch amenable to any wrist size. Forgive the dust here. You can see the cabochon on the lugs. This is the ogival, or torpedo bullet lugs, first introduced on the DB1 chronograph of 2002. That was the company's first product, and while Bethune design has come a long way since then, the little ogival tips have been present on almost all of the series, not all, but almost, and they continue to remind us where Bethune came from here on this DB28. Now, the dial is something that collectors were asking for in tandem with the smaller size, and that is a solid dial. Some people thought that having the balance, the barrel bridges, the escapement, all of that front and center was a bit overwhelming or too avant-garde. So instead, Bethune, which makes cases, movements, and dials in-house, decided to create something very different. In the spirit of its Starry various, we have a starscape here, but it is the sky reflected on a sea. Now, this technique debuted in 2023 on the original DB28 XS Starry Seas. It is a random guilloche, meaning the lathe that created this dial was set to a random setting and then allowed to run out the 25 individual dials for the series. You can see its shading makes for a dramatic, almost dynamic aesthetic, and what we have are little individual dowels of white gold that are inserted into drillings in the dial. And by default, this is the sky over L'Auberson, Switzerland on the night de Bethune was founded in 2002, but it can be any sky over any location at any time, customized for the owner. The hands in titanium are bright polished and partially skeletonized, and then we have a conventional track featuring minutes and hours radially arrayed around the outside. And you can see that the dial has excellent depth to it. Now flipping it over, this is where you get everything you would expect on a DB28. It's just on the case back rather than on the dial side. So we have a movement, manual wind, 2 barrels in series with a 6-day power reserve. Because the mainsprings are phased to each other, it has a very flat and long, even torque curve. So it's less of a curve than a plateau, making for very even force to the escapement for most of the wind. Also, because this is a patented self-adjusting barrel system, you cannot accidentally overwind the watch as you're winding it up to the 6 days of power reserve. You can see we have 1, 2, 3 shock protection springs on the balance, and this is twofold purpose. One is to prevent damage to the balance staff pivot. Okay, that's what all shock protection does. But by creating a further buffer between the case and the balance staff, it is able to spend more time in its pivot cup than if it were being shocked with the protection of Inca block alone. So it also has a chronometric purpose in that it improves the timekeeping. The balance is blued titanium with white gold bulbs in its rim, also patented. It's one of 10 balance wheels patented by de Bethune watchmaker, co-founder, and creator to this day, Denis Flageolet. He looks to reduce the impact of temperature change on timing, to maximize the percentage of total mass in the rim, and also, when possible, to reduce the effect of aerodynamic drag. That parasitic reduction in efficiency is evened out as much as possible by the nasal-like bulbs for the masses. Now finally, you can see that the hairspring is actually clamped together. It's 2 pieces shaped by hand and then clamped back together, a patent in its own right. It is designed to allow concentric breathing like an overcoil, but without the shock susceptibility of an overcoil or the thickness of an overcoil. Finally, you can see there is a silicone escape wheel to improve performance as well as extend the service intervals. Now, finishing is world class. You can see that the cap of the base plate has been fired purple and then engraved using de Bethune's ripple-like microlight engraving structure. We have a fired bridge at center that bears the center of the triple parachute shock protection springs, but it also acts as a brace over the barrel cap. So if you look carefully, you can see that there is a barrel bridge cap and then a barrel bridge. So you have 2 superimposed bridges, and each one has a mirror beveled edge, which is an extraordinary level of attention to detail and finish. The bridge for the balance, Grubel 4C style, is mirror polished, but also rounded all the way around, which is extremely difficult to do. And then you can see, if you look carefully, that the barrel bridge under the cap actually features Côte de Bethune striping. You can only see a little bit of it, but it's there. The ultimate in attention to detail. And then the springs for triple parachute, those have been mirror polished themselves, just like the barrel bridge cap, which is fully specular, mirrored and flawless. It is poly noir. From any angle except its one reflective angle, it looks black. That's why that is called black polish. And even the jewel sinks have been internally reamed and polished. Polishing like this black polishing at de Bethune, is done using a spinning wooden plate with diamond paste. There's also spiral solarization or snailing on the barrels. And if you look very close, you can see the teeth of the ratchet wheel have been micro-beveled on their surface. This beats away at 4 Hertz, so no tricks are played with the beat rate to get the 6-day power reserve, and it's all 30 meters water resistant. If you love this watch, reach out to me. These are now available, 25 pieces for 2024. This is the Purple Rain. Reach out to me at Team Mosso at thewatchbox.com for purchase and pricing details.